Hi, my name is Jason Wisch. I'm up for Black is King, and I'm calling from lovely Santa Monica, California right now on set.
My name's Mara Alcaly, and I worked on A Quiet Place too. And I am also calling in from Brooklyn, New York.
My name is John Hutchinson, nominated for A Quiet Place Part 2, and I'm in upstate New York on the Hudson River.
Joe Mullaney, A Quiet Place 2, and I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Chris Gormley, nominated for Concrete Cowboy, and I'm calling from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
My name's Nathan Harrison. I worked on Nomadland, and I'm calling from New Orleans, Louisiana.
My name is Klaus Darrelmann. I'm co-nominated with Janice Pauly for Tenet, and I'm calling in from Aqaba in Jordan.
3, 2, 1.
Nice.
That's pretty good.
Coordinations.
Good morning. Welcome to the LMGI Contemporary Feature Nominee panel discussion. We are very excited to have a diverse group of films nominated this year and look forward to hearing about the experiences that the location managers have to share while working on these fantastic projects. My name is Miguel Tapia. I'm location manager based out of Los Angeles, and I look forward to leading the discussion along with my compatriot, Carey.
Hi, Carey. I'm out of Atlanta, Georgia, and looking forward to having a conversation with everyone. Thanks for being here.
I'd like to begin with Jason Wisch, and I have a host of questions for you. So Black is King was filmed in a lot of different locales across various areas. I wanted to hear about how you first thought of approaching the project in terms of dealing with the various locales. What was the first step in your process in figuring out how you wanted to plan things out, how you wanted to structure and structure the flow of your show so that you were successful?
Well, I mean, basically, I handled most of just the West Coast stuff. So California, Arizona, anything that was on the West Coast was primarily me. So I didn't do a lot of the stuff for the other locations. I helped out a little bit here and there, but we did have scouts and managers all over the world, which was quite unique because I've never worked with in that situation before. It's usually on set, no matter how big my project is, it's just me. I don't ever have assistants. So that was definitely different. But I just pretty much handled the West Coast stuff and helped advise on some of the other locations.
So you helped advise on some of those locations. How much time do you spend like on Zoom chats or video calls on the phone? How much of that time was invested in trying to explain to them what it was that you needed, or how much involvement did that?
We didn't have any Zoom chats. I mean, basically what I would do is I would do some research, as I usually do on the internet, and just send stuff off to the production, and then they would usually forward it to whoever else was in need.
And Jason, with locations that are all over the world like that, how do you make sure that everything is tying together as it's being filmed in various places? How do you make sure that your locations are tying in with the others?
I mean, again, we separated how the things were filmed. So when our main talent, Beyonce, needed to film in South Africa, she went to South Africa. She was there for a couple of months, like a month. So while she was there, I was doing stuff in LA. So, you know, they were pretty good at not pushing us on, like, on certain things, not pushing us on time. Like if I told them something wasn't available, they'd be like, fine, we'll shoot it when it's available. So there wasn't a lot of pressure on me when she was out of town to have things like ready that, you know, in 2 days. I did have some pressure on the first week I worked for her, worked on this. It was, I basically got a call and asked if we could shoot at Havasu Falls the next day. That's what production wanted. And that to me was the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. I was somehow able to convince Havasu Falls Indians to allow us to film there the next day. But other than that, I mean, they did give me time to find stuff. So, and for the people in the other parts of the across the globe, once they were there, they were handling pretty much all that stuff.
Can you talk about a little bit about that experience when you got this phone call about wanting to film at Lake Havasu and you want to go shoot there the next day? How big was the work that you were going to do, and what did that conversation entail that got you in the door?
So I had just worked with the first time I had worked with the producer, and we were on a shoot, and I was able to get some stuff that what he didn't think we could, that was really hard to get. And I had basically told him, I've never not gotten a location, and that might have been my first mistake, because he literally he called me 2 days later and said, I have a job for you. It's going to be a lot of work. And I said, okay, I mean, I'm up for it. So this was on a Saturday. And the basic conversation was, we want to shoot something on Monday. And I'm like, I can't get permits. It's the weekend. And he told me who the client was. And I went, all right, let me see what I can do. I found a couple of locations that were open if I could get a permit on Monday morning. I called Film LA, explained to them who it was, and they got me permits. But this was for stuff in Los Angeles and around the area. But honestly, it wasn't perfect. It was just what I could find at such short notice. So a conversation we had Tuesday morning with the production was, we would really like to shoot at Havasu Falls tomorrow. And I'm like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way this is going to happen. But I'm one of those guys that even if I don't think it's going to happen, I will put 110% effort into seeing what I could do. So I called the film commission in Arizona and said, explained to them what we were doing. I couldn't tell him who the client was because it's, top secret. And I explained to him what we were doing and what we wanted to do. And he said the same thing. He said, there's no way that we have to go through the Havasu Indians reservation, and they take a month to decide anything. So for some reason, we got in a conversation. He told me he was an actor. He had moved there. His brother was an actor. His brother just happened to be James Earl Jones, who was in the movie with Beyonce. And the producer was in the car with me, and I turned to her and said, I got to tell him who it is. And she said, do what you think is best. And I told him who it was. And he said, give me 5 minutes. And he called me back with the lawyer for the Havasu Indians. And I called him at 11 o'clock in the morning, explained what we're doing. He said the same exact thing. It's going to take a month. He said, we have a meeting at 1. Let me talk to them and see what they have to say. He called me back at 1:30 and said, you guys can film here tomorrow. So I'd like to say that was me being persistent. I think it had a lot more to do with, it was Queen Bee and everybody was okay with her being there. So logistically, the problem is we didn't know how we were going to do this because they actually wanted to film in Sedona also. So it's a 4.5 hour drive, I think, from Havasu Falls to Sedona. The other thing is it takes 3 hours to get into down to the falls from the top. So at 10:30 at night, we still didn't know what we were doing. So actually, I came up with a plan, which was have her fly there, small crew, no dancers, fly there, helicopter down there, shoot for 4 hours. Meanwhile, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I would take the crew and drive to Sedona, set up in Sedona. And then when she's done shooting, she'll fly there, and she should get there about 5:30, and we can shoot for an hour and a half. And that's exactly what we did. So it was a lot of logistical stuff. It has, and the fact that I have produced before and I've coordinated, I think helped a lot with me knowing how we were going to put this together, because such short notice, we had to come up with something. And so my plan was actually the most viable thing to get done.
You say you work alone a lot. So in this case, were you literally the only person handling both Sedona and the Lake Havasu work?
Yes. Yeah. And it was a lot of work, and the film commission there, Mr. Jones was extremely helpful, and the locations were extremely helpful. Like when I got to Sedona, that we were shooting at a park there, and they went out of their way for us. They had people come and help us. It was so when we showed up at I think we got there at 3:30 in the afternoon. By the time we got there, they had people waiting for us to help us do what we needed to do.
Why do you think they were drawn to that specific location and wanted to make that work so much? What was it? Did you get an idea once you kind of got through it, through the logistical hurdle? Did you get an idea of why it was so important to film there?
She was definitely looking for the most visually stimulating locations we could find. And obviously the movie has an African theme to it. And so what she wanted was things that felt like they could be in Africa. So the best waterfall we could find within a distance of us in Los Angeles was Havasu Falls. I did find a bunch of other places. California Film Commission, again, went out of their way for us. There was a couple of waterfalls that they hooked us up with, and those places were like, yes, you guys can come film tomorrow if you want. But they just weren't quite as spectacular as Havasu Falls.
Yeah. Is it fulfilling for you, having been through that experience, or how fulfilling is it for you to have gone through that experience? I like to consider it, you know, the roller coaster ride of a production. You know, it has its highs and lows, but there's something about the experience that is very gratifying. What was that like for you at the very end of finishing a project like that, and then ultimately seeing it on screen? And it's beautiful. Obviously, it got a lot of accolades and praise, but what was that for you after kind of finishing everything off? What did you feel?
I mean, well, first off, the truth is I wasn't 100% sure what we were doing. Like, this wasn't told to me that we were doing a feature film. This was, as far as I knew, was vignettes that she wanted to put together she was going to tell some video story, was all we were told. So it wasn't told to us that that was going to end up being this spectacular feature. And it's probably the longest I've ever done. You know, a lot of my work is, I do commercials, music videos. So my work is 2-3 weeks. So this ended up being on and off probably 9-10 months. So of work. And so for me, this is the longest I've ever worked on any single project. So the gratification of some of the things we had to find and get done were tasks that I would consider impossible. Like, I've never heard of anybody, I'm not going to brag, but I've never heard of anybody calling a location and flying there the next day and shooting. I don't know how often that happens, but I don't think it happens too often. So being able to tell that story is, to me, very gratifying, that I was able to pull something off. And there was a bunch of other things that happened during this shoot that I didn't think was going to happen, and we were able to pull off and get done. So when I found out that this was a feature and got the chance to watch it, I was actually overwhelmed. Visually, I think I think visually it's pretty spectacular. It's a really well put together thing, and especially not knowing that that's what we were doing, to see it finally put together, I was like, wow, that was a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be.
Wow, Jason, that's so incredible. And I could probably ask you a bunch of more questions, and but I want to jump over to some of our other panelists. So that's fantastic. And maybe if we have time, maybe later on we can talk. Okay. Great. Thank you so much for Kyle, did you have anything for Jason?
Jason, I'll ask you one more quick question. You know, this being a music film that is put into an overall feature, how much more important do you feel it is that the location is a part of the storytelling process in a music film?
I've always said this. I think locations are one of the main characters of any production. I mean, unless you're shooting on a sound stage, finding the right location is a character for the project. It has a tendency to it'll guide the whole shots, the visuals of what they're doing. So if you don't have the right location, you start off with not having the right look. And I've often I do some directing too. So I think a lot of times when I'm scouting, I look at things as a director, not necessarily as a scout. I look at it as if, could I shoot something here? Could I make this shot work? So when I go into a location, I'm looking at it as if I was directing the spot. And I've often actually brought the directors things that they didn't ask for, because I will look sometimes and go, I know what they say they want, but I think I know what I think they need. And it a lot of times I've given directors things and they went, huh, that's actually really cool. I didn't think about that. And there's been many times where the location that they didn't want is the location we end up shooting at. I mean, a lot of times it happens that way. So it's kind of gratifying to me when I bring a location to somebody and they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. That could actually work. And like the production I'm working for right now, I actually have another producer that calls me because he goes, you think outside the box. So I'll call location peoples and they'll give me certain things. And then I come to you because you take it to the next level. And that's what I'm doing for him on another project, is I've brought him some things like the director never thought of. And the director called me and said, I love that. For instance, I brought the Meta, which is underneath the 105 freeway, is an overpass that we shoot at all the time. And the director did not ask for that. And I put it in the mix and he called me and said, I love it. That's great. I have an idea for what we can shoot there. So he basically is coming up with an idea to shoot for a location that I just happened to put on a website for him.
I love it. Well, Jason, thank you so much. I think we're going to move on to A Quiet Place Part 2 as well.
Yeah. Congratulations, Jason, on your nomination. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Congrats.
To the A Quiet Place Part 2 family, if you could help me out, understand, there's 3 of you here, which is amazing. If you could, I don't know who the right person would be to go to for this, but Mara, maybe if you could explain to me the structure of and who the players are here present with us today on the panel.
Sure. So I'm Mara and I was the supervising location manager. John Hutchinson actually predated me on the project and started scouting in a sort of a different iteration of it before I came on. And the whole project was complicated for me because I had a 1-year-old at home in Brooklyn and I was pregnant with my second. So when the whole movie moved to Buffalo, I brought on Joe Mullaney, who has worked for me on many projects in the past, and I trust implicitly, and I brought him on to kind of take over when I had to go give birth.
Excellent. Well, welcome to all of you. Congratulations on your nomination. Well deserved, as I would say to everyone else. But I really enjoyed this movie. I watched it recently. I wanted to ask a question about where the timing of of when you filmed this. Was this during? Did you shoot any of this during the pandemic? Did it predate the pandemic? Okay.
Entirely, yeah. So principal photography was completed in 2019. There was some additional photography the very beginning of 2020, but all of it was finished before. Yeah, and I think scheduled to release in April 2020 originally and kept getting pushed off.
Okay. Mara, have you had experience working with this crew? How did you get involved with A Quiet Place Part 2?
So I was brought on to the first movie, and I was pregnant with my first child on it. So I was brought on, again, unfortunately, for that first movie had not sort of been a part of the scouting. Fortunately, unfortunately, had not been a part of the scouting process. I was kind of brought in late, but I was, familiar with John and his producing team, and they called me when they had a schedule for the sequel.
I wanted to ask John about the process of scouting for the steel mill location, and I understand you kind of had to push to get outside of the zone on that. So I just wanted to see what it took to get to that location and kind of what that meant to you as the scout when eventually production did end up filming there.
the steel mill location, as you know, is like the anchor location in the movie. And right from the beginning, like I started researching 6 months out for the perfect area. So on the one hand, I was researching the whole Northeast, but then I kept being told it's got to be near New York City. Okay, that's great. That thing in Ohio is great, but it's got to be closer to Brooklyn or closer to Westchester. And it was just, you know, the more I researched, the more I realized, well, if it's going to be in New York State, which they wanted to shoot because of the, you know, the tax credits, et cetera, the rebate situation, I knew it had to be in Buffalo, but nobody wanted to hear that. They kept saying, you know, no, you know, what don't you understand? We want to sleep in New York every night in our beds. You know, we don't want to go to Buffalo. So little by little, they let me go a little further north, Westchester, Albany, Schenectady, Utica. And then, you know, one day I was in a factory in outside of Utica, and I got a call saying they want to see if you could find anything in Buffalo, which I've been telling them about for months, but nobody listened to me. So I just got in the car and drove to Buffalo, and the rest is history, because Buffalo had, the first place I went in Buffalo was the Bethlehem Steel Mill, which is like a ruined, eerie, abandoned, it's like a 1,400 acre abandoned industrial landscape that used to have 20,000 workers, and was one of the largest steel mills in the world. The picture you see behind me from the production still from the movie or the advertisement, that's at Bethlehem Steel. So when John Krasinski saw, when he flew up to Buffalo finally, and he walked around there, I mean, it was just, you know, he was in love with it, and he knew it was the right place to be. They couldn't really do interiors there because the buildings were ruins and were kind of toxic and dangerous, but it was some beautiful exteriors. And then Buffalo had other properties like this. We shot the interiors at a steel foundry that wasn't that far away, that was in great shape, but it was really beautiful, at the same era as Bethlehem Steel. And there were all kinds of properties like this around. So it was the perfect place. But if you ever do production in New York, I mean, I'm sure you have the same thing in LA. It's like, we don't want to go to Buffalo. Buffalo is the end of the world. We're going to fall off the earth if we go to Buffalo. But in the end, everybody loved it, and it was the perfect place.
Can I ask what the experience is like for you all working in a town like Buffalo, which isn't a main hub, as you just explained to us, for filming, but there are great locations. So when you bring a production over into these smaller markets or smaller towns, what's that experience for you all as location managers like, you know, integrating within the community?
I think it's mixed, and Joe can certainly help answer this one. There's an incredible amount of support from the Film Commission, and we, for better or worse, we're never really in downtown Buffalo. It's all sort of surrounding areas, including Bethlehem Steel, which is kind of just outside the city limits, I think, technically. It's its own.
Lackawanna.
Yeah, it's its own city, really. So, and you know, even at Bethlehem Steel, they had other productions there, but mostly sort of small scale, some student films. They're not used to getting paid a lot of the time. So this was a big, it's always hard to explain the scope and the size of a larger production to folks that haven't experienced it. But I think for the most part, it was an incredible supportive community, especially in the town that we filmed in as well. That took a lot of conversations. We took that sort of Main Street over for months. But I don't know, Joe, if you have any other examples.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was great. And also the crew, it was interesting crew wise. We had a sort of a chief lighting technician and a key grip from LA. Our special effects guys were from Atlanta. Then we had the shadow department heads from our locals in New York. So it was an interesting sort of melding of crews, because everyone does things a little differently. And then I think that we were fortunate that, I mean, not just Buffalo, we kind of went as far west as Dunkirk and pretty far north in Western New York. So all of Western New York was very excited. And I think we're lucky that obviously the first movie was so successful, so people were very excited, and everybody knows John Krasinski up there. So it was really, I mean, the whole community, everywhere we went, everyone was very welcoming. So I felt sort of very supported by everybody there, which was great. And which is kind of the opposite of working in New York City, which is, you know, obviously filming is not the top priority here. So it was nice to feel welcomed.
Do you guys enjoy working outside then, I take it, in outside of New York every once in a while, just to kind of shake things up?
Yes, to be clear, I love working in New York City, and everyone here is great. But it was a nice change of pace.
Yeah. Joe, actually, I'd love to hear more from you, since you were kind of boots on the ground, if you will. What were some of the challenges for you on this project? What were some of the more difficult things that you had to handle, even if they weren't necessarily locations related? What were...
I think Mara kind of touched on it as far as explaining the scope of certain things to people, you know, just like that sort of thing. And we had some pretty long lockups for, like, I don't know if you saw the scene with when the trains laid across the road, like kind of pitching that to the town stuff. It was interesting that we got to go to a lot of town board meetings and sort of explain it to them. There was a lot of exteriors, so we're constantly worried about rain kind of jamming us up, but for the most part, we're pretty fortunate. But yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges was the marina scene as well. There's a lot of unknowns there, and with the town, but everything sort of came together. We're pretty fortunate.
I think also, sorry, just also to tag on to what Joe said, one of the other sort of challenges is the creative team really relies on maximum flexibility every day, everywhere. So everyone is expected to be prepared for any scenario at any time, everywhere we go. And it was much easier to manage on the first one when we were really in just a handful of locations, and everybody, we could move around within those. Much different when you're talking about, you know, miles of streets that you're shutting down, or train, you know, tracks that you're closing and the like.
Hal, did you have any other questions for our wonderful Quiet Place team before we move on to the next panelist?
I guess, you know, this second part to A Quiet Place kind of opens up the world to the Abbott family. Was there one location in particular that you were most excited about kind of adding to that post-apocalyptic world?
John, I feel like you should go first.
You mean besides the steel mill location? I mean, that was the focus of the apocalyptic vision. You know, that we kept coming back over and over again to the, you know, the steel mill. But the another real important one Mara alluded to was the town. You know, the movie begins with the flashback, really important dramatic scene, and we had, you know, the original movie was shot in a different town and in upstate New York, so we had to kind of, you know, match that town or figure out a way that we could match that town, and it had to have a certain width of the street, a certain elevation, because in the script, you know, you're looking down the street from a high point, looking, you know, it turned out that we looked at every town in Western New York, you know, and eventually, you know, we hit upon that one, and it was just, you know, it wasn't as dramatic a location per se as the steel mill locations, but it was, you know, it was crucial, and it really, you know, it was the perfect place to be, and the town was very cooperative in the end.
Yeah, and it's kind of our only glimpse into that world before the alien invasion, so it's the only peaceful time.
Yeah,
I have a question, actually, digging into that real quick before we hear from Mara and from Joe. Why was that town specifically more crucial than, say, the other options you presented? What was the one thing that clicked for the creative team that location worked?
Well, I drove around Western New York with the production designer for a long time, and one of the things we learned was that the towns in Western New York, and I don't know historically why this is, are much wider than they are in the rest of upstate New York. I mean, the main streets are like huge. And he kept turning down these towns because there was just, it wouldn't work, for like the scene where you see the bus driving, and Emily Blunt's got to go in reverse and the bus almost hits her or whatever. It's got to have, there was a certain width, a certain configuration of the main street, which, seems like you see it everywhere in America, but for some reason, upstate New York and Western New York, the towns were really, really wide, and he kept turning them down. Architecture was fine, everything was fine, but just like the main street was just huge, and so he was just trying to find the right width to it and the right architecture.
And you found it in this town.
Frankly, when I first went there with him, I mean, I scouted a bunch of towns, and then he said, "Okay, let's go look at Akron, and we'll look at this one and that one." And I didn't think it was all that interesting. Compared to some of the other towns in terms of architecture, but there was something about the elevation. He kept going to the high point, looking down. It was just the perfect elevation looking down and the perfect width to it. And then in the end, the art department added a lot on to the buildings, overhangs and stuff to match Little Falls, where the original movie was shot. So, anyway, it was just a matter of those few ingredients that just made it different. And I was just recently working in upstate New York on a Netflix thing, and I was doing towns again. And once again, the main streets are just huge. I don't know why they're so much wider than anywhere else in upstate New York, but they make them, it gives a whole different flavor to the main street.
Excellent. I have just one last question. Amira, this is one I want to direct to you. I would love to hear about, you mentioned that you were pregnant on the first project and that you had a young child and were pregnant again on part 2. Can you talk to me about what it's like, what challenges come up for you as a woman, as a pregnant woman, going through an experience where you're shooting primarily on location? If you could share with us some of your experiences, I would love to kind of.
Sure. Yeah. On the first one, it was, again, we weren't in too many locations, so it was sort of easier to be able to leave set and not be there all night kind of thing. On this one, I signed on to the project and sort of had told everybody my situation, and we were based in Brooklyn the whole that sort of last month of the job, which overlapped with my due date, was going to be on the stage. It was going to be perfect. John wanted to sleep in his own bed. So I was like, fine. And 2 weeks later, they let the production office go. Stage space was gone. We were moving to Buffalo. And I really I was more than happy to see the project through as best I could, but definitely understood if production wasn't ready to support sort of the fact that I had doctors at home, in the city. So I was really commuting up and back to Buffalo weekly, which was challenging for sure. And I think it's exhausting, but it's also exciting. It's certainly a special story to tell. And on the second one in particular, what I think just on a sort of, for me personally, what was tough was trying to do my job effectively and not feel like I was harming myself in any way. We were going into spaces that had tons of asbestos, lead paint, lots of environmental contaminations, radio stations with all sorts of stuff. And it was sort of a daily concern and challenge, but everybody's happy and healthy. So
I think it's commendable. Congratulations to you, to John, and to Joe, and to the rest of your team for the nomination. It was a great movie. I enjoyed it. So, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. Again, like with Jason, I probably could sit and talk to you all forever about this stuff. Any last comments or questions, Kyle?
Just congratulations on the nomination. Beautiful film.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Guys.
All right, Concrete Cowboy, Mr. Christopher Gormley.
Hello.
I'm going to pass this off to Kyle because you had some in the pre-meeting. We had some fantastic questions that I think I'd love you to direct to Christopher. So welcome, congratulations, Christopher, for your nomination. Look forward to hearing about your experience on the show.
Yeah, Christopher, I'm excited to talk to you about this one. I know this was a special film and that you actually got to film in the actual locations where the Fletcher Street Urban Rider Cowboys would be based out of. Can you talk to us about what it's like filming basically in the character of the story's actual homes for the movie?
Yeah, I mean, that was tough, and that was a long lead up. Even before I started on the production, I mean, I started about 8 weeks before we started shooting, like you would normal prep on an indie like that, like a little indie. But a year before, 2 years before, our director, who wrote it, he was down there talking to the guys as they were writing the script. So, there were people on this production on Fletcher Street talking to guys 2 years prior to the movie was ever made to write it. So it wasn't like, I mean, our director was down there shoveling horse crap, you know what I mean? Like he was paying his dues, he was going down there and meeting everyone. And so from the very beginning, the script was being written. It was adapted from a book that's about the riders, and that's where the father-son story comes from. But the story, that's sort of like a young adult novel book, maybe like a kid's book. But the story of Concrete Cowboy, the movie, came from him getting all the guys there to tell them their stories and getting a couple of them as like our key consultants. So our director was there 2 years prior. The producer, Stacy, who hired me, was there a year prior. And so when I show up 8 weeks before, even though there's no contract signed, there's like, they know the movie, like the movie's coming. A lot of them have already bought into the movie. They know that they're already cast in the movie. So there was a very good, they did it right. There was a very, very good relationship walking into it before you tackle it as a location and the permits and getting the contracts and all the stuff that we do. It's so much more than that. We're telling these people's stories. We're in their homes. We're in their lives. I mean, every horse, other than the horse that they're riding, which are like, Hollywood movie horses, every horse you see in the stable are the horses that were in the stable. I mean, you have to have a contract with everyone that has a horse in the stable. These are things I didn't know about that you needed to think about on a specific project like this. Like every stable has a different owner. How about that? And you're shooting it in 3 stables for 3 weeks. But it was, they had to get on board, and the majority of the guys got on board. I mean, they're all, there's 50, 60, riders that call that place home, and it's all intermittent, who has horses down there, who doesn't. So the majority of everyone got on board and was super supportive, and that sort of carried us through it.
I have
feel any additional, go ahead, Miguel.
Yeah, no, sorry. This is sort of not really related to location specifically, but for me, Concrete Cowboy is a really interesting story to tell because of the history of cowboy and how the word cowboy actually came to be. And it may not be, main knowledge that really the first cowboys were Black African Americans, and they were slaves released from, who were released from slavery. So how much of that was a part of your experience in, working on this production? How much of the history of just even preceding the Fletcher Cowboys, how much of the history of cowboys did you get involved with? Did you talk about or impacted your job?
So, I mean, it's a lot, because the way this was done is that there was a lot of things that were happening concurrently. So it's a movie. So we're prepping a movie. That's one piece of the production. The second piece of the production is, as they're prepping the movie, our director, the production company, are actually getting, so you go down there and you'll have kids that are, 10, 15, 10 to 15 years old. riding horses, being trained to ride horses. You have adult men, and then you have like old guys that are in their 80s that look like, you know, Clint Eastwood type characters, you know, black Clint Eastwoods, you know what I mean? So it's like, you go down there and they want to tell you their story. So the second part of it is they just started making a documentary, which is funny. It hasn't come out yet. I don't know if it is going to come out, but there's so much footage that they shot of these guys, just sit down interviews of them telling their stories. And there's some of that at the end credits, obviously, but there's dozens and dozens of interviews and talking about the history. And people would come with VHS tapes of them of the black cowboys doing a parade on my block in North Philly in 1986, and we did a VHS thing of it, and they would give us these tapes, and so the production company would go and transfer the tapes, and they would start cataloging it. The stuff didn't make it into the movie, but there's so much history and so much wealth and that sort of stuff, and so wealth of knowledge. And part 3 is from the very beginning. This again goes back to 2 years even before making the movie. The story of the movie is true. These stables, none of the cowboys own. They're just owned by these guys that own these rickety warehouses. That neighborhood, gentrification is taking over everything. When you watch the movie, it's a time capsule because that big corral, which is just an empty flat piece of land owned by the city of Philadelphia, doesn't exist anymore. That has already been taken away from them. We shot this movie in 2019. It's senior living now. And there's all these negotiations on, do they give them a little plot of land there, and the more they develop, the less they get. So it doesn't even look like that. And the stables are going to be going away. So, and we knew that that's part of the story that they wrote. That wasn't really part of the book. So Pura was created by the people in the production and some of the people on Fletcher Street and some of the just general Philadelphia urban cowboys. That is giving them a permanent home, and that's PURRA. Everyone should go and donate, give $50 to these guys, because the whole point is that they're coordinating with the city of Philadelphia to go to Fairmount Park and find a permanent home for all of the black riders in Philadelphia. Because if you watch the movie, Fletcher Street isn't like, I'm from Fletcher Street. There's 10 Fletcher Streets all over the city that then become 5, then become 4, that then just become 1. And so then there's going to be 0. So it's really open to all the black riders, and that they're still looking for funding. I mean, they sort of have a spot pick that the city is just going to give them in a park. And then what you're saying about the history is that all this video footage, and it's not just going to be stables for black riders for generations and generations, but it's going to have a historical museum element. I don't know how deep of a museum it'll be, but you know what I'm saying? There'll be a historical element. And that came from Ricky, Dan, Stacy, and everyone in that production while they were writing the movie, while they were developing the movie. It all sort of, and then it's funny because all that stuff, which is extremely important, kind of went on pause to shoot the movie, which we shot in 20 days. And then once the movie was over, that picked back up.
Wow. So as you were filming, you knew that eventually there was development coming to the Fletcher Street stable as you were filming?
Oh,
wow.
The stables, there's 3 stables, all different owners, and they're just guys that have these decrepit warehouses that have people renting space for horses. I mean, and they obviously like the history. They like the cowboys being there. But at the end of the day, if someone offers them a couple $1 million to put apartments and gentrify the place, it's going to happen. I mean, the empty lot that we call the stable, which is just an empty grass lot, was owned by the city of Philadelphia. And so we knew at some point that was going to be sold and be developed. But we went through the whole filming without it being sold, and kind of knowing it was going to happen. We kind of knew that was the one that was going to go first. And again, that if you watch the movie, that Fletcher Street doesn't even look like that anymore. There's construction to a massive apartment building.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
There. But
I think it's important that you captured that footage.
Yeah, I mean the stables are still there, and the cowboys are still there, but I mean it's going to happen. Yeah, why? How would these guys not sell the land? I mean, we all know how it goes.
That is so true. Can you delve into some of the challenges you had filming the scenes that happened in the graffiti tunnels? Like, what were some of the the interesting obstacles that came up?
The big massive tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the first one was so it's an old viaduct. It's an old, you know, from the 1800s massive viaduct that has active train tracks down at the other end where we didn't film. And it's from the 1800s, and it's all homeless encampment, and it's owned by our transit system, SEPTA, like our metro. And the biggest challenge was we were told no, we weren't allowed to shoot there. I mean, it was something that our director, because he's from Philadelphia and he's made, you know, a lot of, because he's a commercial director, he just knows all these places. Like he just said, I want to get in that viaduct. You know, it is a place for urban explorers for years. You can go on YouTube and find it. It's one of those mecca of urban exploring in Philadelphia. I'm sure every city has those places. And we said, yeah, but no one can shoot there. No one, we can't. And so we started a process, which wasn't, I didn't have months, you know, we started the process 2 months out. So we started at 2 months, and this was day one. Day one was the tunnel, and they didn't want to compromise. We scouted other things. Here's the backup for the tunnel. And they said, we're full court press. We're getting this tunnel. And they said, yes, we got the tunnel, you know, all hard hats. And I mean, it was the liability. I mean, we basically gave up everything. We prepped that tunnel the way you would do, you know, we were a little $4 million movie, but the way you would do a big budget feature, the way you would prep something, going in there and for days and days and cleaning it out, and you know, talking to homeless people and convincing them to move further down. I mean, the whole thing. But at first it was like, the biggest challenge was they said no. Once they said yes, and we got it, after all the paperwork and letters of intent and telling them what was going on and begging and lots of begging, because we weren't going to pay them a lot of money. Once they said yes, then we had a little bit of time to prep it and do what we needed to do and get it clean and safe for everyone to work and caution tape everything off. But yeah, that's something that you just can't film there. And once we film there, you don't know how many other productions will just call you and say, so we want to film there. How do you do it? And I just say, you know, good luck. They're not gonna say yes again. I don't know if they'll ever say yes again. I think that's a one and done thing, but who knows?
Mm-hmm. Well, kudos to you for making that work. I know.
Yeah, I mean, it really is the story. I mean, you come to people with the story, and you do a lot of begging, and you jump through every hoop that they feel necessary for you to jump through, so they feel comfortable with you being there, and you're just be relentless, and you always have a backup.
Has that been is Philadelphia in general, is that consistent part of the process of working there for you, or was this a unique experience for you in getting that type of location approved?
No, I mean, Philadelphia is a great town to shoot. I mean, it's amazing, and we have amazing locations. And when you look at Philadelphia as a city in the greater Philadelphia area, the 5 counties outside of it, I mean, normally what we do is outside productions come to us, you know, a New York, you know, an action movie that wants to shoot in New York, but they have $10 million and they want to blow up everything, come to Philadelphia, because it's just, you know, the permits are easier, you can shut streets down, you can blow stuff, you know what I mean? Like, so, you know, it's very, very film friendly. That tunnel is just, you know, that's a unique thing that, you know, people just really didn't even attempt. I mean, there's some places that you don't attempt because you're like, well, there's no way. I mean, other people on this panel have talked about it, you know, and they were talking about that steel mill in Buffalo. Like, you knew you're not going to go in there because the environmental thing is, you know, so you just gotta, if a director really wants it, I think someone else said this, like, even if you know it's a no, you just got to go 110% at it. It could be a yes. Just have a backup.
Did you thrive off that challenge when they said, no, we have to get that? Was there someone in your brain that said, okay, game on?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this movie is that, like, we would just get in the car with the director and the DP and just drive around and pick locations. Like, that's what this movie was. It wasn't like a regular, I mean, it was a regular feature in the sense that we had Idris Elba and, you know, we had you know, it was a union job and all that sort of stuff, but it was very much like if you were making a little movie, because it was a very, very small crew. You know, it was like a tiered union job, but even, it was just, we just got in the car and picked stuff, and you know, the director is just so excited. It's not like you're getting in a van with a Teamster and everyone's on their phone. And the worst is when you're scouting driving stuff, but everyone's on their phone. So you want people to look out the window to see, well, this is the driving work. And they say, are we there yet? You know, I mean, they're nightmare scouts. And you're in my personal car. We're driving around North Philly. We find a street. We love it. We go out there. I immediately they're already like picking out their shots. And I'm talking to neighbors on the stoop. And I find out one of them's the block captain, and he tells me what goes on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And we call the AD and say, like, we're shooting this on Wednesday of week 2 because that's when, you know, the garbage gets picked up the day before and the street looks the best. You know what I mean? I hate using the word organic, but that's the best word I can think of. I mean, it just, you know, you're just with this very small team every day with this very, very high energy. You didn't have any time. And once you started shooting, I mean, it's 4 days. It's 4 or 5 day weeks. It's 20 days. I mean, once the train leaves the station, you're just going.
Yeah. So you had you were really integrated in the creative process then, and you were like literally they were there with you.
Oh yeah.
Do you?
They were very green.
I'm
they
sorry.
were very green. So I would drive. They would just say, so we everything was in North Philly. Like, so Strawberry Mansion is where. So think how it rated. Strawberry Mansion is where the Fletcher Street stables are, and then you're into the western end of North Philadelphia. I know that sounds confusing. So then you just radiate out. So we just get in the car, and they would say, "Chris, show me cool stuff. Just show me cool stuff."
Yeah.
To a scout, that's the dream. You mean, first of all, you're only filming in a 15 block radius, 20 block radius. That's visually amazing wherever you go, and they tell you just to show them cool stuff. Oh my God, it's amazing.
That is a dream for any scout, I would think, right? Can I get it?
And then they run around, they're doing a chase sequence, and they go, you know, and then they walk in. So we're on the streets of these abandoned buildings, and they got to figure out this chase sequence. Method Man plays a cop in it, and he's chasing the kids. So we basically construct the chase sequence by them just chasing each other around. The DP, director, production designer, producer, and we construct it, and then they just run into an abandoned building. And then you start going over in your head, who do you think owns it? How am I going to get this? And then you wind up getting the building, and you wind up doing all the cleanup work you need to do. And it's in the shot of that chase sequence where they're, you know, and there was a scrapper there. And we started talking to the scrapper, and all the junk that was there was his. And he says, if you give me just a little bit of money, he has these giant machines. He would design it in a way that made it a maze that we can go through, which is what we did. So this guy basically took like an old boat and old lumber with the designer and the art director, and they went there a couple of days before and created the maze with all the stuff. And that was just because he was just there. He was just a crazy scrapper guy. And instead of being afraid to talk to him, we just chatted him up, and he's like, "Oh, I own all this stuff."
I think this is incredible. I think that's the best part of the job, right? When you can work with people and you can create with people, and I think it's really fantastic. And I actually think this is a really great segue to our next panelist, Nathan Harrison over in Nomadland, because I have an inkling that you maybe had some similar experiences to Christopher. So, Christopher, I want to say thank you so much. Congratulations. I hope that the producers really succeed in their goal. And if you can really quickly, what was the name of the organization that they?
Pura, P-U-R-A, Philadelphia Urban Riding Academy.org. And it's a combination of, you know, some of the producers are like on the board, but it's really run by one of the Philadelphia riders, Pura.org. They got a GoFundMe. Just go check it out. And if you're willing to donate a couple bucks, please do it.
Count me in. Well, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations. And yeah, Nathan, welcome. You're on the hot seat now. Nomadland to me is like I said, similar. I think in terms of, I think Christopher was experiencing, because you were on the road a lot and you were in different areas and you were dealing with real people and real experiences. So I first want to start off with how you got involved with the project, and then if you could get into when you heard what they wanted to do, what ran across your mind? Like, how am I going to do this? Like, what were the thoughts that ran across your mind?
Sure. So I got involved with the project through a friend of mine was a producer of the film named Dan Janvey, who I've worked with a lot here in Louisiana with the director Ben Zeitlin, who did like Windy most recently and Beast of the Southern Wild. And the kind of the approach that they wanted to have for Nomadland, where we're going to places that don't have film infrastructure or like really have, you know, maybe various levels of interest in like art movies and incorporate like a lot of these kind of real elements, a lot of, you know, there's a lot of reality in Nomadland. Like it's based off of a book that's by a journalist who documented the lives of these real people, and a lot, you know, like everyone except for Frances McDormand, who you see is pretty much just doing their thing. Like if the people who are playing these van dwelling nomads are the actual van dwelling nomads who we brought into the film. Yeah, a lot of the approach to it was just kind of getting to know these places and getting to know these people. Casting and locations were really tied up with each other. I also did a good bit of casting for some of the like background people and people who had smaller roles and things like that. So like it would, you know, if like there's a scene where we're in a mechanic shop and you find a mechanic shop you like, and you find the people who work at the mechanic shop, and you say, can we come by next Thursday and film a scene here? And will you be in the scene and just talk to this lady about fixing her van? And that was kind of the process for everything else as well. You find the place that attracts you, and the people who populate it, who have different jobs there and different relations to the place, and you incorporate them as well.
And I assume you had some advanced time to plan these things, correct? Like you would know in advance, we're going to go here, so you can, you know, permit all these things and do all the other sort of logistical parts of the job, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
or maybe
I don't know
not.
if we did much permitting, because a lot of these small towns don't have a process for issuing film permits. But yeah, I would kind of travel ahead of the main crew for a couple days, a couple weeks, and kind of get stuff lined up, get you know, get different options kind of lined up, and we pick the one they want. Then they come in, kind of meet everybody, and then I would move on to the next spot ahead of them.
Sort of not a locations related question, but because you were so integrated in sort of the casting aspect of it, how important do you think it is to tell this type of story, and why do you think, and what did you get out of the experience?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think like, to me, what was like cool about making this film and working on it, it's just like I think that the real world is a really cool place and really interesting, and it's usually better than what you could come up with if you know, if you're trying to imagine something. Like there's probably something in the real world that's actually cooler than whatever that thing is, you know. Like I'd imagine with some of the African-American cowboy scenes, like they probably were presenting you videos and doing things that are just like really interesting, really fascinating, really amazing to look at. And it was similar on Nomadland. It's like you know, like there's this old couple who are the last remaining inhabitants of this former mining town called Empire that collapsed in the housing bubble in 2008. And they just sit up in their little house and drink coffee all day. And every couple of months, somebody comes down to the storage unit And so like you just go up there and you drink coffee with them for like a couple days if you can. And then like the scene we filmed is the man, his name is Gay, and he comes down and he helps Frances McDormand load up from her storage unit. And you know, that was the scene in the movie, and I couldn't have come up with that. I don't think that, you know, it's just like, it is this truly incredible, beautiful, unique place. And you could say the same thing about the Badlands, or about the laundromat, or about you know, this like weird little cowboy dude that we picked up in the desert who just became a character in the movie. So yeah, that as someone who like likes that in the world, it was neat to work in a way that brought that in.
And do you, in comparison to the projects you've done in the past, how has this been, how was that experience different for you?
I mean, it's like a lot of the work I do in Louisiana is kind of that. You know, I really haven't done a whole lot of like kind of real proper projects where you're like closing things down and like doing it perhaps the most professional way. It's just like, I really like this bar, let's go drink at this bar for a couple of nights. We'll make friends with the guy, and then we'll figure out what we can pay him, and he'll let us film here at a certain hours, like when they're not busy or something. And you just sort of like incorporate that, you know, into the process of making the film. So, you know, it's not just drinking in bars all the time. I swear I do real work, but that is like, I don't know, like that. The films I've worked on in Louisiana, which has been most of the work I've done, some of them take a couple of years, that has been the process where you like, you go to a community and you build relationships there, and you understand how that community functions, which is not something you're used to, but wherever you go, like things get done and people do things and have complicated lives, and so if you actually spend time there and kind of understand that, when it's time to make a movie for whatever god awful reason, you can kind of use some of those systems and some of those people involved to help you and understand what's realistic and what will seem off to someone who's from that area.
Nathan, I feel like with most productions, when a location is selected, the production company kind of clears everything out and then fills it with what they think should be there. So I think what you're doing and actually just shooting it in its natural state makes it a very special location, and each one kind of tells its own story for itself. I think one of the most talked about locations that is true to that point is the Amazon Fulfillment Center. And I think we have to talk about that location. Do you mind kind of going over, you know, how you got access to film there, and then kind of your role prior to filming that made that possible, and what you actually ended up shooting inside?
Sure. So there've been like some stories in the press about that, because it's like the first time Amazon's let anyone film there. And they are true. Like literally Frances McDormand just like wrote them a letter and was like, can we film there? And they just said yes. We did not expect them to. I was like, I spent several weeks like in Nevada scouting like other warehouses that could stand in for like a large factory where you do this kind of repetitive work and there's all these machines moving around. There's this factory where they like make junk mail, like they're the ones that send you all of your junk mail. And like that was our backup, and we had everything lined up to like work in the junk mail factory. And then I don't know why they said yes, but Amazon agreed to do it. They had very few restrictions. They were quite accommodating, and one of the things that we had going for us was we were a very small crew. so we were really able to adapt. We were about, it was about 20 people in the entire crew, including like caterers and whatever. So most of my job at Amazon was just figuring out how their center operated, and like how we could put an actor and a camera crew through a couple days of work there to get like different scenes, and with what people, so like they did a call, and like people who were interested in being actors would in the film would sign up. We auditioned them, which is like you just talk on a camera for like 5 minutes, and then you just kind of build your day around that, and you build your scenes around that. So like they do a safety meeting in the morning, they do these stretches, they eat lunch in this place, they do this task in this place, and we're just figuring out like where we can set up without disrupting, without like slowing down this like, you know, like Rube Goldberg situation they have in this fulfillment center. And we just put the actor and these Amazon employees who signed up to be actors, we just kind of staged them in different places throughout the day, and they just like did whatever job there was. So like when she's like packing boxes, she's like packing boxes and sending them off to people. So she just like worked there for a couple hours, the actor for Instagram. And the people around her were the Amazon employees who wanted to be in the movie, and they were just kind of like positioned in different places, also working, like also doing their actual jobs. But yeah, it was just kind of adapting to that actual place rather than the other way around.
That's incredible. Thank you, Nathan. So I don't want to, I want to go ahead and move on to our next panelist, Klaus Darrelmann. Thank you so much, Nathan. Again, congratulations. Good luck to you, and good luck to everybody else. And so thank you for sharing all that. I hope we could do another one of these at some point, because I think what you all are sharing is very interesting. And I thank you so much for the insight that you've been providing to us. So Klaus, first things first, you're in Jordan right now. What are you working on?
It's a Marvel TV show about a new superhero that comes from Egypt, or that it's placed in Egypt. I think this is, as I can say without violating my NDA.
Copy that. No, you're good. We don't want to. We don't want you to lose your job. So, and I realize it's probably pretty. What time of day is it there right now?
It is sun's gone down, as I said.
Oh, did we lose Klaus? Is that me? Did he?
No, he's frozen.
I think I just lost you for a second, right?
There you go. Yes. Could you repeat what you were just saying?
Yeah, just this is 7:15 here. I popped my first beer, and yeah.
Well, this will be a great conversation then. So Klaus, you worked on Tenet. Can you explain to me one of the things that you mentioned in the brief that I was provided was that if you said I come from movies where you went everywhere and did it all practically. So working on the scale of Tenet was very exciting for you. Why was that very exciting for you? What was different for you in the experience?
Well, Nolan is just not going for like, oh, we do that in VFX. Like what I experience now every day on this TV show is like, oh, we do this in VFX, and the VFX will take care of that. He always goes for the, no, I want to do it for real. I don't want VFX. I don't want crowd replication. He wants, if there's a theater that has like 4,446 seats, he wants 4,446 extras. And this is the amount of extras that show up on the day. And then you're just kind of blown away by the scale of it. It was quite an experience just seeing all this happening, like this icebreaker, just mind-numbing stuff that you can experience on a show like that.
So, well, that's interesting. I know, because it is interesting today. We do have a lot of visual effects help in the work that we do. So Tenet was shot as practical as possible. How did that make it difficult for you? What location did that make it most difficult for you?
The most difficult thing is you don't have a script. You can't read the script. You get a briefing if you're lucky. So nobody had a script. I think there were kind of 4 or 5 scripts going around. That was it. I wasn't the supervising location manager on that. Janice was, but I started, I think, a little bit earlier than she did. She actually read the script. She had like, I don't know, 3 hours at Warner Brothers, and read the script and then leave it there. You don't get a script. So you have got no clue what this is all about. You find it strange. And then you see like that people are moving backwards, because that was part of his movie, that actors and extras had to train walking backwards for all of these shots where you kind of reverse the time and traffic is going in one direction, but people are going in the other direction. Really, really weird stuff. And they built like a lot of cars that went like 60, 70 miles an hour backwards, which is also quite difficult. So it is all of that. Obviously doesn't have to do that much with location, but it was very, very interesting to watch that. From a location point of view, it was kind of a jump start, because I think I got the call like about 4 days before I got on the plane, and then 2 days later, the director, the production designer, and the producer were landing in Stockholm. Was like, okay, let's look at stuff. So it was really a jump start. I was kind of hearing the stories with envy that you actually got like half a year run up to that. I didn't get a script. I just got like, oh, you can fly to Oslo and to Stockholm. We want to look at this. Don't worry, we know what we're looking for. So that was it.
So you had no prep time, no script. We were just thrown into the fire.
Yeah, but it was because if you get under these premises, obviously you can't lose. It's always like, well, what do you expect if I don't know what's going on? But it was very interesting, and it was very charming, because they were very happy with what they saw, and it was more like a finding process as well, because we didn't have any idea. It was looking at Christopher Nolan had traveled Scandinavia, and I think he had been to Stockholm and to Oslo. He liked the Oslo Opera House in modern architecture, which later ended up in the movie. And from there on, we were always looking for this location for the great end fight, the Stalag end fight, which ended up being in the US, Eagle Mountain. And this kind of dictated the whole scout schedule, because we were kind of, okay, are we going to Budapest now, or are we going to Romania, or maybe to Serbia? So it was all up in the air and flying. It was a very intense week that I was running around with them. But in Oslo, Christopher Nolan remembered a movie that he had seen that was shot there, and that kind of sparked his interest, because no big movie ever was shot in Estonia. It's a tiny country. I think like 4.5 million people living in the whole country. We just flew over there. I had one contact there that I could call, told him like, okay, be prepared for everything. Just set up the whole scout logistics. But apart from that, we didn't know exactly what was going on. And it was very interesting just to drive with the director through a city like that. And he was just literally go like, oh, I read about this building, this old Soviet style opera house. And next thing, you're standing on the roof of that thing and trying to find out how to get in there. It was interesting.
Well, Klaus, it's up, for all of the locations, I'm just curious, when you're asked, can you be on a plane in a few days, and then in 2 days after that, everyone's going to be showing up and we expect to see a bunch of potential locations. How do you kind of narrow your focus as a scout to find those perfect locations, so that what you're showing when they get there just shortly after, that those are possible, picks for the film?
Yeah, there was the question asked for, like, we need the opera house. It needs to be the Kiev Opera House or something. There was a basic brief, and to find a big open site. I remember I got a drawing from Nathan Crowley what it should be like, this great Stalag thing, and there's a tunnel going there. It was super complicated. You were like, this doesn't exist. I'm pretty sure. But you always, that doesn't count. You always have to see if you can find it, and see if you can find something that's similar. But in our case, they knew what they wanted to look at more or less in the countries. And we went to Sweden and to Norway, to Stockholm and to Oslo. Looked at a lot of things beside that, tunnels and stuff, which there's a hell of a lot in Sweden as well, and of course in Norway. And then in Tallinn, it was more like, oh, I like this. And then the minute he spotted that that big event hall, the Lina Hall, that ended up being the Kiev Opera House, that was kind of the first anchor point to go there. That kind of sparked his interest. And after that, we were driving through the city, and I was looking at the map with the local guy, Christopher Pier, who actually deserves a lot of that honor, because he kind of had us there, had no experience with the scale of a production like that, and he actually had to make everything work, because he had to talk to the people, because Estonian is a language that only Estonians understand and want to learn. It's super complicated and has no similarity with any other language. So he really got us in these places, and we all made it happen. And we were driving through the city, and we were looking at the street, because we wanted, they were asking for, oh, we need freeway, like 6 lanes, and we need to close it for 3 weeks. And we're like, oh, good luck, because usually they are not that wide freeways like in the US, in Central Europe, or unless you go to the very big cities, and they wouldn't let you close down the roads like that. But then we saw this stretch of connecting road that connected a former socialist block, like a massive amount of former socialist apartment blocks with the inner city. They built that in the 50s. And that was this interesting road that they ended up doing the chase on. And that was a separate story in itself to get that going. That was a tough job to get the permission to close that down.
I'm sure. Well, I'm curious, you know, this is one of the films that is of a scale that allows you to kind of film in multiple countries globally. It's an international production. This, after all, is the Location Managers Guild International. Can you kind of talk about what it's like working with managers that are familiar with other countries? As you move internationally throughout production, what is it like networking with managers across the world, and kind of what do you learn from each other that make you better at being a location manager?
Yeah, I have to say I started off in the international part very late, because I was usually just working out of Germany, because this is my hometown. This is where I know what's going on. And usually the US and the UK productions are not looking for somebody from Europe when they're going abroad. They usually take their own people with them. So my experience is only the last 6, 7, 8 years. But then I can say the most important is always like listen to the people and kind of tune in with them. A lot of the time you have the feeling that people come to the country and think like everything works like it works at home. This is kind of the expectation. It's like, oh, why doesn't that work like it works here at home? And that's why we as a film production always try to kind of put our system on top of that, which sometimes leads to big problems, is my experience, but sometimes obviously works out well. So it's a lot of communication to make sure that there's no misunderstanding, and that the people don't get fed up before you even started shooting in their city. That's one of the most important points, I think. And the experience, the most important thing, I think, when you coming with a big production like that, or anything that, for example, in Estonia, the biggest movie that they ever shot there, the budget for that was the money that I spent on locations in Estonia. So this is the amount of money that they were familiar with spending. And so the most important thing that you really have to tell them from day one, call everybody that you know, try to get a team on board for every department. Just make sure that you team up right after we leave from the first week of scouting, and don't expect this will be too small. And you always tell the people, think big, and it will always be bigger. Otherwise you get surprised.
Yeah, and I think with a movie like Tenet, you have to think big through every process of it. I don't know if this was one of your locations or not, but I had to ask, and maybe it's just a metaphor for how it works with each of the locations. But when you're scouting for an airplane hangar, at what point do you mention to the location that you're planning to crash a plane into it? Or for any of the massive stunts that take place in this, do you just start with that? Like, look, we're a big movie, these will be big, or do you kind of ease into that?
Well, you have to ask Janice about that, because this is completely her thing. Everything in the US, in India, and in Great Britain and Italy, I didn't have anything to do with that. So I just know that they started very early talking to the airport. They shot in LAX a bit, I guess, and the other one was in Victorsville Airfield, if I remember correctly. But I know that this was also a very, very tough one, because there was a big airplane producing company nearby that didn't like the idea in the first place, and it took like literally months to convince them, and finally being kind of happy with what they then did there. It was quite an effort. Yeah.
I don't doubt it. I feel like most of the locations take just a massive amount of work. Is there one location in particular, like is there one particular challenge that you were able to overcome that you remember most?
Yeah, most rhymes with mold. The location that we shot the opera house in was infested with mold, and that was really, I was going in there and was like, we're never going to shoot in here. This is outright dangerous. You can't be in. You would have everybody would have to wear a gas mask. And before we kind of went in there for scouting, it had been closed for, I don't know, more than 10 years or so. And all these seats were still in there. And obviously the roof was leaking in a million places. And obviously that started molding everywhere. And that was really a big, big challenge, because then you have to look into the whole hazmat thing, what's in there. And I was so afraid that they used like all the dangerous stuff in that, which lucky enough they didn't. It was just the mold and the amount of work you have to put in that just to get the mold out of there, and the amount of money that it costs to make that happen, because you can't sit your extras and actors in seats that still contain that, and that goes like literally into a seat that is that thick, and you have to make sure that everything's out of there. That was quite something. Wow. Yeah,
I love it.
Well done.
Most rhymes with mold. I love it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, we can all agree.
We all deal with it, right? Who here has dealt with mold at some point in time? Thank you so much to all the panelists for your time. We really appreciate it. I'm going to do something, I don't know, maybe if this is done before on any of these types of panels, but I would love to give each one of you an opportunity to thank one person who was pivotal to helping you on location in the production. And that can be someone from the permit office. It could be, the guy that owned the coffee shop. So if there's someone that you would love to give a special shout out to, thank you. I would love to actually give you guys that opportunity. So we'll start off with, well, we don't have Jason here today. So can we start with the A Quiet Place Part 2 team? If you guys can just go ahead and do your special thanks.
I would say Bruce Bonhoff, who was our contact at the interior steel mill. He probably cleared about 3 football fields worth of leftover steel and scraps from when the factory closed down in the 80s, which was instrumental.
There's so many people I would thank, but Tim Clark, who's the head of the Buffalo Niagara film commission, probably the most involved, helpful, crazy film commissioner who'll do absolutely anything. He'll call the mayor up at midnight because you suddenly had this idea, you want to scout a bridge and you need sheriffs to close it down for you, whatever. They were just amazing. And they were very, they've done a lot of filming, but A Quiet Place 2 was the biggest production in the history of Western New York. And, they were really happy to have it, but whatever you do in that area, Tim goes all out. So, he was like really, really important to the whole thing.
Let's go to Christopher. Who is your special thanks and why?
I mean, on a job like Concrete Cowboy, it's almost impossible to pick one person because every block you're in, I mean, I could just say everyone from Fletcher Street that let us be in there and just, let us take over their world for 4 weeks. I'm going to pick, we were talking about the tunnel, so I'm going to pick one person. So I'm not just like copping out and saying everyone at Fletcher Street. Ed Wallace from SEPTA, who was at every single meeting we were at, and he was the facilities logistics guy that needed to he needed to accomplish everything that we asked. He's the guy that had to set it up. So there was this old train guy with the stogie. You can picture him in your head with the uniform. And we would say, Ed, we're shooting in this tunnel, and we got to go down there. And he would say, I don't know how they let you do this, but let's go figure it out. And Ed, we have to have our special effects guys drip water down from these grates. The grates ever been opened? I haven't been open in 120 years. Think we can cut them open? Yeah, we can cut them open. I don't know how they're letting you do this, but we'll figure it out. And he was the guy that figured it out. And he let us do all these amazing things. And I can't say at the beginning he was the most supportive guy, but at the end of it, he's looking at us and we have horses in the tunnel. And he's looking at me going, I don't know how they let you do this, but it works. So
that's awesome. Ed Wallace. All right, yep. Nathan, who would you like to thank and why?
I got a lot of help from a woman named Swanky Wheels. She's a nomad of 10 something years. She's in the movie. She's like got the short hair. And she really helped me get my head wrapped around the desert and how it works and how you set it up there. Yeah, she was a tremendous help.
Excellent. Klaus.
But obviously, besides all the people that I've been working with, like Janice, Steve, Benny, they know Daniel, they know it anyhow, how thankful I am. But Christopher, Pia, because for the fact that his wife was pregnant and actually his child was due during the time that we scouted for the first time in talent, that was exceptional dedication to a job. Right after we left, he got his child.
Excellent. Well, Kyle, is there any last words you'd like to say? I want to say congratulations to all the nominees. Your projects are all fantastic. There's such a diverse group. And it's really, truly like exceptional what we're able to do here with the LMGI to not only award, but to recognize the work that you all do. Congratulations. You are all well deserving. To anyone that worked on your teams. Thank you so much for the work you do. And Kyle, if you have anything you would like to add.
I just want to say thank you all for taking the time to be here and talk with us today. This is such a great opportunity for not just us, but anyone that's going to watch within the Guild. It's so great to get the insight and what it takes to make these special films. And thank you for making those films. We've enjoyed watching them. So appreciate everything and best of luck.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.